May is a fab time in my garden. Towards the end of the month, frosts are less likely, and that means tender things can be planted out in beds and borders. So sit back and enjoy the advancement of summer. It's a patch in the corner of my garden, and it consists of 3 reasonable sized raised beds. The soil inside the beds has been enriched with some good organic matter and a sprinkling of blood, bone and fish meal to give my new seeds their best start in life. Choosing what to sow can be a minefield. I mean, there are so many packets, that mountain high and different varieties. What do you want to grow? What do you want to eat? And that's what it boils down to. Don't think you've got to grow absolutely everything. Work out what you love eating, what the family likes eating, and grow them. And don't sow them all at once on one day. Successional sowing, short rows every 2 or 3 weeks, will give you cropping right the way through the year, rather than for that fortnight in July when you're away on holiday. Here I'm going to put in things like carrots. This one here is called flyaway. Deters carrot fly. Now, carrot fly lays its eggs on the roots and it makes little maggoty holes. So if you know in your area that you've got carrot fly, or even if you don't, it's worth growing a variety like this. Just as with flower seed packets, vegetable seed packets have the dream on the front and the reality on the back. Here's that mini encyclopedia that tells you when to sow, how far apart the rows need to be, how thickly to sow them within the row. It's all on there. Now, one thing to make you smile here, top left, average 500 seeds. Are you a family of rabbits? Well, so thinly, there will be plenty of seeds in there to give you a good feast of carrots this coming year. So what do I need? A little piece of cane bamboo in a minute, and right now a garden line. You can use 2 bits of cane for this stout twine if you want. I've had this old garden line for donkey's years and I really rather like it. So you take the end which has got no twine on it, push it in where you want to mark your row, right the way down, then unwind, and then when you get to this end, if you take that several times round there, and that wants to be really tight on the ground, you then need your bit of bamboo cane to flick, keeping my foot off where the row is, and then alongside the taut line just flick out a tiny furrow. Err on the side of shallowness rather than too deep. Just run your watering can along the drill. All you're doing is getting a degree of moisture in the bottom of that furrow to make it instantly amenable to seed growth. Seed packet in pocket, and here are your seeds. Now, carrot seeds are not particularly large, but they're large enough to get a pinch of in your finger. Each one of those a carrot, potentially. So start at the end of the row and very gently take a pinch in your hand. Don't crush them, but lightly sprinkle them so the seeds are nestling anything up to half an inch apart. They've got to have room to grow. It's not an exact science, and you'll find that some are filmed closer together and others are further apart, but you will get there. And when you get to the end, keep the rest of the seed in the packet. You've got to be patient. It'll be 2 or 3 weeks before they're up, but I've got to cover them first. You know, my granddad, to label his row, would always have a bit of cane, and he'd take the outer packet and he'd push the cane through it, and he'd mark his row like that, which was lovely, provided they came up quite quickly, because if they didn't, that would rot in the rain and you'd forget what was there. So I've got a better label at the end. But what I want to do first is to take up my line out of the way. It won't disturb the seeds. There they are, they're all in there. Out that comes. And this is where the rake does come in handy, because you can reach across with it just to fill that furrow back in, very, very gently, teasing back the soil on either side. They need a really good watering in now. Now, don't use a hose pipe with nothing on the end, because you'll just wash them out. So a very gentle sprinkler head like this, which distributes the water evenly and gently, and you can give them a really good soaking in. Don't just think, you know, by doing that and stopping there, that's enough. It's not. I'm going to be here for a couple of minutes yet, so I'll see you in a while. Last thing to do, label the row, and 2 to 3 weeks time we should see a little forest of green seedlings coming through. First out of the barrow, scabious pink mist. Scabious is a lovely summer flower. Well, spring and summer, it's starting early, and all these yet to come. Pincushion flower is its common name. Look in the centre there and you can see exactly why. Good green foliage, and this is a plant for sunshine and really well drained soil. Whenever you're choosing a plant, find out what it likes best, give it that, and it will grow in spite of you, because it'll have all the conditions it needs. So sunshine, well-drained soil, and you'll enjoy these beautiful pink mist scabious flowers right the way through the summer. I'm going to pop this one in the kitchen garden, in the veg patch, because it'll attract the bees in, which will help to pollinate the peas and beans. So it's a kind of multi-purpose flower, really. Great at the front of a border, great in the veg patch. Next up, Pulmonaria, the lungwort. In the old days, and we're going back to the Middle Ages, they used to think that plants gave you a clue what they were good for by the shape of their leaf or their flower. This leaf looks like a lung, apparently. I've never had a closer look at mine. So they called it lungwort and decided it was very good for diseases of the lung. Don't try it at home. It's a beautiful, beautiful early spring plant, not least for the leaves because they expand and they're covered in these white spots. But also, in this variety, which has the lovely name of twinkle toe, you get flowers which are both blue and pink. Very early flowering, but the leaves will then take over and be interesting themselves. And again, like the scabious, bees love this. Now this is a plant for fairly moist soil and dappled or even heavy shade. In full sun, it tends to wilt a bit, so try and give it a little bit of shade, and you'll have several weeks of these glorious flowers to be followed by a summer of spotty leaves. And it's going in a shady part in my garden, this one. In at number 3, a group of plants that are really good for shade. Ferns. Don't disparage them because they've got no bright flowers. These are really useful ground coverers in quite dense shade. If you have a spot where very little will grow and it's a bit rooty and only ivy seems to do well there, do try ferns. You'll find some of them are evergreen, and these leaves, or fronds as they are really with ferns, will stay on right the way through the winter. Others die down, and in spring you can cut off the dead fronds, and as these new croziers, these little shepherd's crooks of new leaves come through, the whole plant is refreshed every spring. Some ferns are very good for dry shade, and that's one of the most difficult parts of the garden to get things established in. How can you tell which ferns are good for dry places? Well, rather nicely, the botanists have called this particular genus Dryopteris. Just remember, Dryopteris, good for dry shade. This is going in a shady spot under some trees in my garden. It'll be happy there. Every garden should have this. Lavender. The foliage, which is almost evergreen, smells like mentholyptus sweets. Really good for clearing your tubes. And then in summer, the flowers, which are lavender or pale pink or white, but I prefer the original lavender coloured lavender, purple flowers, beautiful and beloved of bees. This is another great plant to put in the veg garden, where it will attract your pollinating insects. But anywhere else in the garden, in a really sunny spot, it will make a lovely low border. It only grows about 1 foot 18 inches high, that's about 45 centimetres in the lower varieties. There are 1 or 2 taller ones, but I don't like things like Hidcote Giant, only because the flowers flop over. But get Hidcote or Munstead and you'll find they're about that tall. The flowers make great lavender bags to sing among your smalls. Well-drained soil, bright sunshine, lavender will suit you down to the ground. This is going, again, I'm going to pop this in my veg patch, because then every time I walk in those raised beds I can, lovely. Good old lavender. No garden should be without it. And finally, fifthly, a plant I would never ever be without. This is one of my all-time favourites, the hardy geranium. They vary in height between groundhoggers and this one, Wargrave Pink, which will grow to about 45 centimetres, 18 inches, smothered with bright pink flowers right the way through the summer. Fabulous ground cover. Lovely leaves. Some of them are aromatic. This is a little bit. It will spread in clumps. Plant this where you've got trouble getting anything else to grow. It's a really good doer, the hardy geranium. Good for soil which is inclined to dry out, though do try and water it immediately after you've planted a new one and keep it going until it's established. But also in sun or dappled shade, it will thrive in either. And it'll make this rug right the way across the ground. This is going in one of my borders underneath some shrubs, where it'll make fabulous ground cover, giving you a pink highlight to dappled shade. There are loads of different hardy geraniums. I don't know one that isn't worth growing, but do try and plant them in groups of 3, 4 or 5 to give yourself a decent sized mat. And then you will find, come the summer, this downy foliage and the slightly fingered leaf is absolutely plastered. In the case of Wargrave Pink, with bright pink flowers. Absolutely fab. So there you are, 5 plants, the Fab 5, which will be good in any garden and available in any good garden centre. They're going to look smashing in my plot. Some people are really obsessive about their lawns. I like stripes on mine, but I'm organic. I don't use weed killers. I do very little to it. The stripes come as a result of having a rotary mower with a heavy rear roller. The stripes that look darker to you are where the mower has come towards you and bent the grass down towards you, and the paler ones, the grass is lying away. It's as simple as that. I don't have a very complex lawn care regime. There are just 2 or 3 things that I do to keep it in good condition. After a really wet winter, every single lawn is full of moss, because moss likes damp conditions. What you can do is you can just rake out that moss. You may be tempted to use a moss killer. Don't waste your money. You'll still have to rake out the blackened moss. Much nicer to be kinder to wildlife. Just tease that moss out with a wire tooth rake, sometimes known as a springbok rake. It is very springy. You can see now the grass is getting room to get air and growth and light, and when the spring rains come, get out and give your lawn some blood, fish and bone, some feed, and that way the grass will then take over the room that was previously occupied by the moss. And what you can do with it is either put it straight on your compost heap or leave a few piles around the garden, because it's great bird nesting material. Every lawn has its well-worn patches, or patches of turf where a plant has flopped over from a border and killed out the grass. This is one such. Not very pretty, is it? But at the start of the season you can really make a difference. You could just strip out that and replace it with turf. That's quite expensive. Easier here, I think, really, to fork it over and reseed it. This is what needs replacing. Now I could just skim off this moss and cultivate the ground a bit and then sow seed, but I want to give it a bit more nutrition and get it to grow away faster, so I'm going to take out a bit of that old tired soil completely and replace it with some fresh, decent quality topsoil. There's no point in sowing directly onto hard earth. You know, grass seed's tough, but not that tough. This is really good quality topsoil. Put my feet in it, I'd grow in this. I'm using topsoil rather than compost, because if I use compost it's so organic that it will gradually rot down and disappear. Topsoil is earth. This is nicely enriched earth, so it's a combination of a bit of organic matter but mainly soil, and that will stay at the level that I leave it at. I'm going to firm it with my foot just to make sure it's really firm. I can take a bit more because it wants to be level with the soil in which the grass is growing. So now that I've firmed it down with my foot, I'm just going to tickle it up slightly with the back of the fork so it'll take the seeds more readily. There are various grass seed mixtures available designed for different parts of the garden. There's a grass seed mixture for shade, there's another one if you want a fine bowling green lawn. What we want here is a tough mixture which has got lots of dwarf ryegrass in it. It's dwarf, it stays tough, it can cope with wear and tear from feet. So of all these, shade, show and tough, I'm going for tough. So before you rip open the lid and then start ploughing the fields and scatter all over the place with it, just notice on the side, if it says open here, this is rather like Alice in Wonderland's bottle, drink me. Open it here, stick your finger in, and what do you get? Holes in the side which design it as a sprinkler system. So work fairly low down. On a breezy day, if you try and sprinkle it from up here, it'll all go in your flower border and you'll be weeding for months, okay? Down quite low, as low as you can. Isn't that efficient? Just from a few holes in the side of a cardboard container. Now that, I know, is quite thick. It's thick for a reason. Birds, they will come and have a peck, but to make sure they can't reach absolutely all of it, just lightly again with your fork tickle over the surface, and some of it will rest underneath. It's not important that it's all covered, but some of it will be under, some of it will be on top. Just mix it around a little bit and then water it in. And this will help contact the seed with the soil, and when it's gone down like that, let it soak right in and then do it again. Now keep your eye on that, because if that dries out completely they'll just fizzle out. So try and water it every now and again in hot dry weather like this. And the best precaution you can take really now to keep birds off it, if you possibly can, is either some twiggy pea sticks laid flat across the ground, or else a piece of chicken wire laid over it. Don't use canes with cotton strung between them, because that gets around the legs of birds like blackbirds. And then hopefully I'll have a lawn which looks a darn sight better leading up to the steps, because you see the thing about these edges is they're critical. You don't believe me? Come look at this. It's embarrassing, isn't it? What I need is a good crisp edge there. And the way to do that is with a hose pipe. Make sure you leave your hose pipe in the sun, especially on a cold day, otherwise you'll have a job to get a decent curve out of it. And then fiddle to get it absolutely even all the way around. I've arranged my hose so that the cut surface will be just inside where the grass is growing, because those grass roots will then hold that edge firm once it's been cut. What I need now is the best possible tool to cut that edge. This may look like an instrument of torture, and it could be, but it's actually what we call a half-moon iron. You can see why. Half a moon, and it is excellent if you keep it sharp for cutting new edges on a lawn. Try and get the half moon into almost its full depth. This is one of the most satisfying jobs in the garden because it looks so rubbish, and I know it still does, but oh, you just wait. Just wind the hose up now, in it comes, so I don't need that anymore. And this is the moment of revelation, to take out what I cut off. Ta-da! How much better does that look? Looks like a garden now, doesn't it? And those plants are going to grow and mask that edge bit. They've got a bit more room to grow, but that good clean edge I can maintain with a pair of edging shears. That's all it will need. Maybe another year or two's time I may have to recut it, but I'm pleased with that. One of the things I really love about my garden is that it changes with the seasons. Something I planted a while ago will suddenly come good. One flower that is symbolic of spring is the daffodil. Narcissus is its Latin name, but we tend to call the ones with big trumpets daffodils. Glorious flowers. They'll bloom in borders, in pots, and even when naturalised, as we call it, in grass. The key is to plant them as early as you can in autumn, round about September, because they start rooting very early. Get them a good 6 inches down so they've got plenty of sustenance, plenty of moisture, and plant them in groups of 10 or 12 in clumps. And that way, come the spring, when you've forgotten where you put them, up they'll come and do really well. One of my favourite varieties is growing in a greenhouse border here. It's called Skype, S-K-Y-P-E. It has a white perianth, the back bit, and a very, very pale salmon pink trumpet. It's the follow-on in gardens which is most rewarding. The white of the snowdrops, followed by the yellow of the daffodils and the narcissi. But then comes the real colour in the form of tulips. Every single shade except true blue. You can have the lot. These can be planted slightly later than daffodils and narcissi. The daffs are going in September. Tulips right up to Christmas if you want, often in November, the main planting season. And wait for them to come, and when they do come, boy oh boy, make sure you look for 2 things in your tulip. Firstly, obviously the colour, but the time at which it flowers. There are early flowering tulips and late flowering tulips. They also vary in height. Some are only about 6 inches, others up to a full 2 feet. If you want them to flower over other border plants which are quite low down, go for the taller ones.
I love stuffing them in pots. And I have a stone table here in my kitchen garden on which I put these large terracotta pots simply stuffed with tulips. It's rather like having a jewel box, lifting the lid and drooling over what's inside.
Now, you remember I showed you how to sow seeds for summer flowers? Well, exciting things have happened. That's what I did with my cosmos and my begonias. Was I sowed them, you saw what I did, very, very fine seed like begonia, it's like dust, sowed it on the surface of the compost. The cosmos, I just lightly covered with compost. And then I put them in this, my little factory, a little propagator. So what is a propagator or a propagating case? It's a place where you can start off propagating, growing things. Seeds, cuttings will all start their life here in a sheltered, warm environment that's humid and conducive to growth, other than somewhere where it's going to get drafts and fluctuating temperatures. There's a thermostat in here, and it will keep the atmosphere in there steady, humid and warm. You'd grow if I put you in there. You can get smaller versions of these that will fit narrowly on a windowsill inside. You can even plug them in with a little heated panel at the bottom. Relatively inexpensive, but so useful at giving seeds that boost to start them off in life. It's heated to about 20-21 degrees Celsius. That's about 70 Fahrenheit. The heat is in the bottom, and this is where they've been since I sowed them. Here are the begonias, an absolute rash of tiny, tiny seedlings. And these are the cosmos. And the sweet peas too, which I pushed in, if you remember, with a pencil. This is such a wonderful moment, however long you've been gardening. You sow a few seeds, dry as dust, and you think, what can they possibly do? And then you end up with young plants. The trick now, of course, is to move them on. They can't stay in here. They're going to run out of food, they're going to run out of sustenance. We need to give them a home that will see them as their main halfway growing house before we plant them out in the summer. You can tell, because they've grown so well in this small space, that they're really gasping now to grow up. They're turning into adolescent plants, and we know what adolescents are like when they want to move house. They're keen. So I'm using little wooden trays. I like wooden seed trays. There's a kind of nostalgic appeal to them for me. You can use plastic ones if you want, but make sure they've got good solid rims on them if they're plastic. Some of them are really flimsy and will crack. Don't throw away plastic. Try and keep using it as long as you can, and then it's okay. So they're ready for a move, and this is where we do the operation we call pricking out. What pricking out means is basically transplanting these youngsters to a wider spacing so they've got room to grow. That's it, simple as that. Why pricking? Well, you'll see I use a sort of pricking motion in a moment to get them transferred from the pot into the tray. Use a compost which is recommended for young plants and seedlings. You'll see it written on the bag, and this says, suitable for pricking out. When I've got all this compost in to what I think is a good level, I'm not firming it too hard, doesn't want to be solid, so it's just tapped. But it's easier to prick out into, particularly with tiny seedlings, if the surface is smooth. I made this from old floorboards and 3 bits of square doweling. It's a presser. It just smooths the surface of the compost. You can tell how old this is. It's got woodworm, but it's still very serviceable, and I'm very happy to use it. I'm not pressing very hard. I'm really just sort of rubbing it on the surface to make the surface smooth, because particularly with smaller seedlings then, you've got a better chance of getting them evenly planted. So there we are. Not overly firmed. You can still see my fingers indenting if I press the surface too hard. I am ready to start pricking out. I'm going to start with the cosmos. Now, to transplant them, you need a dibber, but quite a fine one. This had a little tiny spade on the end of it. I never used it, so I chopped the spade bit off, and it makes a great dibber, slightly tapered, pointed at one end,
And this is used both to prise the seedlings out from the container in which they're growing and to make the hole in the new one and tuck the compost back around them. Make sure you've watered your seedlings really well. I gave them a good soak before I brought them out, because what you don't want them to do is to get a check to growth. Take your dibber, push it down the side of the pot and prise out a cluster of seedlings. And lay them on the surface of the compost. Now, the most fragile part of these little plants is the stem between the shoot at the top and the roots at the bottom. Try not to touch that at all, but instead, with your dibber, prise the roots apart, keep holding the top half of the plant, not the central stem, and put your first plant in. Now, do not worry that you're burying it rather more deeply than it grew in that pot, because that will encourage it to be more stocky when it grows. Lightly push the compost around it, and there you are. You've reduced its height, which is handy. Those roots will develop further up that stem and it'll be perfectly happy. And what you do is you space them out in the tray, and generally with a tray this size, you're looking for about 2 inches apart, 5 centimetres. You get about 4 down one side and 6 down the other, which means you get, how's your maths, 2 dozen plants. So that label can go in there, and then I shall give them a good soak. Start your watering off the tray, on the path, and then move across the tray. Then you don't get that initial gush, which might just dislodge them. Once it's going, you can keep on watering like that. And again, it'll take quite a lot of water to penetrate right the way through. Remember my rule of thumb, 1 inch of water travels downwards 9 inches. I think, bearing in mind that's only about a couple of inches, we've got enough. And you'll tell from the weight of the tray. Yeah, there they are. They go now not back into the propagator. They don't need that heat anymore, but into the greenhouse where it is protected cultivation. I shall stick them on this shelf here where they've got plenty of light. So what we do with seedlings as tiny as this, like lobelia and begonia, is get yourself a little green cane and sharpen the end of it, almost like a pencil, but even longer and thinner, and then separate it once it's gone onto the surface of the compost. But don't, for goodness sake, try and get them as individuals. Just little tiny clusters like that. But then the technique is the same. Into that hole. But you don't need a deep hole for these. You barely need to just bed them into the surface. These are not seedlings to bury. You do need a steady hand. But it's the sort of job I think in a way is good for the soul. There we are. Nice reward for a bit of patience. I'll water them in, then they'll go in the greenhouse, again not in the propagator, but in the sheltered confines under glass, and then when all danger of frost is past, out in the garden. And I'll try and remember the day I had with you, planting out all these little tiny seedlings that grew from specks of dust.
If you have a sunny wall or fence and you want to brighten it up, there are obvious choices like roses or honeysuckle, but there's one very unusual shrub that I love. It's called actinidia. An actinidia is bare in the winter, but when its leaves come out in spring, they're half white to start with, and then that white becomes half pink. So in a few weeks' time, this white variegated shrub is going to be a pink and white variegated shrub. It is so spectacular on this sunny wall. If you're growing tall yews, squat or columnar box, you'll suddenly find that they act like the gnomon, the spiky bit in the middle of a sundial. And as the sun goes round, so the shadows drift across the lawn. I love topiary, and for me, here on chalky soil, yew is brilliant. The only kind of soil that yew doesn't like is soil that gets waterlogged. Elsewhere, it grows really well, putting on about a foot a year. I clip them over right at the end of summer, and then they stay crisp right the way through till the following spring. What's better, if you want lower growing topiary, is to use box. Now, it's got a bad name recently, and justifiably, because it gets box blight, which is a disease which affects the foliage, and box moth, the caterpillars of which eat it. But we're getting more resistant strains. It's a shame just to wipe box out of your garden. If you grow it well and you grow a strong-leaved variety of box, it makes wonderful curbs along the edges of borders. I can spray it with an organic spray called Zentara every 3 or 4 weeks during the summer, and that for me keeps a good control going. If you're looking for stature and you're a good cook, you need a bay tree. You can have a little lollipop in a pot if you want, if there's no space or you've got a doorstep or a balcony, or you can have one like mine. We call this the minion. It must be a good 15 feet tall. I get it clipped every autumn into this enormous great dome. I love the fact that it's a good dark green backdrop to other brighter flowers, but really it's the size and the crispness of that dome outline which really gives me a thrill. It's wonderful to look at. There's one more thing in my garden which offers the most dramatic spring spectacle. Normally. This year, things are slightly different. One of my favourite plantings in the garden is this group of cherry trees. The variety is Shirote, a Japanese cherry. I planted this small grove of half a dozen cherry trees about 20 years ago now, so you can see how well they grow with their spreading branches. And normally they are simply smothered in white blossom. We went away last weekend, and when we came back, having left the trees full of buds, nearly all the buds had gone. The wood pigeons around here haven't had much in the way of food. They came, they found my cherry trees. They ate nearly all the buds of blossom. We've got blossom at the ends of the branches because a fat wood pigeon can't land on that, but it can land further up. And when it lands further up, it just takes the flower buds out of these little sheaths here. There they are, gone. Hey ho, you know what we gardeners say? You should have been here last year. Gardening has changed my life, so let me show you how it can change yours. I'll be posting new videos every week, so subscribe and let's get gardening together.